Hello and welcome to the British Sitcom History Podcast. My name is Gareth and with me as always is Alan.
Hey man, far out.
No, I'm immediately calling a point of order.
Yeah.
So we are covering Hippies today, and what Alan has just done there is your classic US surfer dude. That's not what we're talking about. These are British late 60s hippies. You've got your characterisation all wrong.
I think I was doing more like Neil from The Young Ones, just for some reason.
With an American accent?
Well, the Americans were hippies as well.
Yes, but that's not what this show's about.
What I found interesting, actually, was in Hippies, the show we're going to talk about, that we didn't really get the classic stoner kind of hippie, which is... Neil from The Young Ones is
not in quite the same way as Neil from The Young Ones, but we'll get to that. I think there's a lot of stoned behaviour. So we're talking about Hippies, which is a 1999 sitcom which ran for only one series. Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? Let's just talk about the context of it, because there's some famous people in this. There's some pretty famous writers, and yet it just seems to be memory hold. It's one of those things that kind of disappeared.
Yeah, which for me makes it quite fascinating to talk about. And also, I think that perhaps it's an age thing. I remember this at the time. I was a teenager, and this was kind of a show that I watched, albeit, I'm not saying I remember it in any great detail or fondness. But it is a real coming together of a lot of British comedic talent at the, this fin de siècle moment, if I dare say such a thing.
Whoa. Breaking out the French.
But yeah, it was an interesting time, but a bit of a misfire. So I want to talk about why does it not quite work. But before we get into that, let's talk about the context in which this show was made. I want to talk about the people involved.
Well, so I've said it's got famous people in it. Let's say who those people are.
The actors-wise, we have Simon Pegg, Sally Phillips, Julian Rhind-Tutt, and Darren Boyd are the kind of principal actors in this. And the writer being Arthur Matthews. The show was actually created in a pilot written by Arthur Matthews and Graham Linehan, although Arthur Matthews was the sole writer of the series.
I didn't know that. I thought it was both of them. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I've learned something already. So, because this was straight after Father Ted, wasn't it?
It was. So those are the writers of Father Ted, amongst many other things, but that was their big hit at the time. But before we get into the individuals, I want to talk about the time and kind of what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so, slightly out of our normal kilter, instead of looking at all the people individually, I created a sort of timeline of the 90s of these creators.
Okay.
Like, how did these guys come together? Because there's so many links and connections.
There's a lot of crossovers between them. There's a lot. Yeah. I don't want to preempt your research here, but I'm thinking there was lots of sort of sketch shows that these guys all appeared in. And I'll shut up. You tell us.
Yeah, but you're right. There's all sorts of stuff, and the Iannucci verse, which
yes. Simon Pegg was in Steve Coogan's orbit for a while, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yeah, and all that kind of stuff. So let me try and create a timeline here. So I'll go through kind of year by year. 1994. Arthur Matthews and Graham Linehan get their first writing credits. They're writing sketches and material for things like The Day to Day.
Yeah.
Which is Armando Iannucci's and Chris Morris's news.
You said parody. A minute ago the Armando Iannucci verse.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I'm all right with that.
I know, I only said it to wind you up.
I don't know why that works for me. There's no logic to my system.
But yeah, they wrote for that. They wrote for Alexei Sale. They wrote for The Fast Show. Famously, they did the Ted and Ralph sketches, particularly famously,
of course,
although they wrote all sorts of things for that. And they wrote for Smith and Jones. Sally Phillips got her first ever TV credits on Smith and Jones as well. Sketch.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So in 1994, they also, Graham Linehan and Arthur Matthews, get a sitcom, their first sitcom commissioned for Channel 4, and it's called Paris.
Not Father Ted.
No, Paris. I've never heard of it. So I genuinely I wasn't aware of this until I actually started doing a bit of research.
Paris is all on YouTube. All 6 episodes are there if you want to go see it. So I've watched that too.
And Paris is a completely forgotten sitcom as well, and rightly so, because it was crap.
Yeah.
But it stars Alexei Sale.
Listen, I'm not going to bat for Paris here, but I didn't think it was as bad as you implied.
Yeah, no,
it's Alexei Sale as a penniless artist in 1920s Paris.
Yes, it does suffer greatly from Alexei Sayle because he's a terrible actor. I'm sorry, that's just the way it goes. Sketch comedy you can get away with being fairly crap. But yeah, he's not a good actor, and it suffers for that. But also, it's just not particularly great setup. It's messy, and these guys are sketch writers, okay? So it's their first foray into sitcom. Let's not judge too harshly. There's a young Neil Morrissey in it, and he's just doing Men Behaving Badly at that point.
There's a nice cameo, a regular guest appearance from James Dreyfus as well, with a very ornate moustaches.
Probably the earliest thing I've seen him in as well. So, Paris again, it's kind of there's a lot of kind of comedy chops going on there, but it doesn't take off. It's not a good show. So let's move on. Let's next year, 1995, and that is the birth of Father Ted. Then we start to get the next creators in. So Sally Phillips and Simon Pegg both work on a sketch show called Six Pairs of Pants.
Now I do remember this. I remember that as a thing. It also had what's her name? The one who was Twist in Spaced. What's she called?
Katie Carmichael.
Katie Carmichael, thank you, and Jessica Hines was in it too.
And Jessica Hines, yes. So that's not a coincidence. This is where Simon Pegg and Jessica Hines met, and they became friends and went on to make Spaced and put Katie Carmichael in it as well. This is all these connections coming together. But Six Pairs of Pants was just a sketch show. It's like, let's get some young comedians out on the circuit. Let's put them together and kind of see what happens.
Yeah.
Sally Phillips was also associated with Leon Herring at this point. So that's kind of bringing her into the
very associated with Richard Herring, wasn't she?
She was particularly associated.
They were in a relationship.
Yeah, so they were, her and Richard Herring were together for a long time. Well, a good few years. 1996, Simon Pegg becomes a regular in the sitcom Faith in the Future.
Now this is interesting, isn't it? Because, as we go through this timeline, there's all this, what you might call alternative comedy. But then he's just slap bang in the middle of it. He's got a mainstream sitcom acting role there.
Yeah, and I think he was just putting himself out as an actor. And he was a stand-up comedian who got into comedy acting through that. And so this was, comedy acting, but a little bit more straight than the likes of Spaced and Hippies, right? So he's just plying his trade, and he's out there and he's being successful. But also in 1996, Simon Pegg does his first work with Edgar Wright, a sitcom / sketch show kind of called Asylum.
Oh, I don't know that.
We've talked about it before. Norman Lovett was in it. It's set in a mental asylum. Norman Lovett being the doctor, and we've talked about it when we did him. But it's where Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright met, or at least when they first worked together. And Simon Pegg brought Jessica Hines into that as well, just because they'd just done Six Pairs of Pants together. Off the back of that, obviously, they go on to work with Edgar Wright in Spaced, but we'll come on to that. I'll stick to the timeline for now. But Asylum is not like a huge success or anything, but certainly sets Edgar Wright out as a director of like, oh, this is a bit weird, and like this has got a director's eye behind it. It's not just some crap comedy, basic bitch stuff, right? 1997, Sally Phillips is a regular in the first series of I'm Alan Partridge.
She is.
We all know that, right?
She plays the hotel receptionist, doesn't she?
Yes, exactly. Simon Pegg is a guest star on that series as well. With Peter Bainham and like all these other people we know. Arthur Matthews and Graham Linehan turn up in an episode as two...
I remember that one where he does his Irish accent. Yes, very good.
He does have an Irish accent.
No, I mean when Steve Coogan does his Irish accent.
All right, yes, okay, I was going to say. Also, at this point, Arthur Matthews is a writer on Brass Eye, which is in that same universe as well. And Julian Rhyme-Tutt is starting to get his earliest credits, but he's a legit actor. He's just out there doing proper acting.
I think of him as separate to this universe. He is. He obviously coincides here in Hippies, but I don't think of him as part of this world.
He very much is, yeah. Let's step forward into 1998, and we see Darren Boyd for the first time. He makes his screen debut as a regular in the sitcom Kiss Me Kate, which was Caroline Quentin kind of vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
He's a young man there at this point. Simon Pegg goes on tour with Steve Coogan in The Man Who Thinks He's It. It was a live tour, and he was a regular.
See, I had that live DVD, so that's not the first time I saw Simon Pegg, but it's like when you watch a DVD 100 times, I can replay that bit of stand-up in my head,
Yeah, so he was out there, he was working with Coogan. Arthur Matthews and Graham Linehan create Big Train in 1998, a sketch show, a slightly off-the-wall sketch show. But so we got Simon Pegg there, you've got Kevin Eldon, you've got like all the other people that we associate with, like Mark Heap, and kind of all these people who are going to end up in Spaced and Green Wing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. 1999, the first series of Smack the Pony begins. That's in March. So Sally Phillips is one of the creators / writers of Smack the Pony, and she's one of the main principal 3 casts. Smack the Pony, anyone doesn't know, was a female-driven, female-led sketch show, which was, that was its hook. Oh, look, women. But it was 1999.
Women apparently can be quite funny.
That was the best we could do. But interesting, Amanda Holden was a regular when they first created Smack the Pony and did the pilot. But then she dropped out. But she was in Kiss Me Kate. So I think she might have dropped out to go and do that. And so they brought in Dune McKeegan, I think it was, who replaced her. Anyway, Darren Boyd is also a regular on Smack the Pony. He plays he's one of 2 men who are regulars on that. So that's in March 1999. In June 99, Sally Phillips makes a guest appearance on Kiss Me Kate. So again, all within that world. In September of 1999, the first series of Spaced goes out.
Wow. So that's when did Hippies go out then? Is that
November of 99?
Right. So this was after Space or during Space?
It was after Space, but certainly it's not like, oh, Simon Pegg's a big hit from Space, let's put him in a new show.
This is all happening at the same time. Space in hindsight was brilliant. I loved Space, but it wasn't like, oh, they're all household names now.
But also, look, this would have been cast before Space went out. It wasn't off the back of that, is what I'm saying. Also in September, Julian Rhind-Tutt makes a few appearances in a show called Let Them Eat Cake, which was a sitcom for French and Saunders.
Jennifer Saunders,
yeah. But that, from what I can tell, is his first kind of comedic screen role. He's not a comedy specialist, particularly at this point. And so Hippies was his real breakthrough as a sort of regular part. So that's how build up the 5 years building up to this, and sort of some of those interconnections and crossing paths and things like that. Yeah. We'll talk about the actors in a little bit more detail later, but I just wanted to set that timeline out. Father Ted ran from 95 to 98. Hippies was the next thing, albeit Big Train was also 98, so that was created by Arthur Matthews and Graham Linehan. And basically, they got... Simon Pegg was obviously, he was doing all this stuff. He was sort of a known entity by this point, but he was also a working stand-up comedian. And apparently, this is according to Simon Pegg's autobiography, which I read, Arthur Matthews and Graham Linehan came to see him do a gig, met him in the bar afterwards and said, we've got 2 projects we want you to come and get involved in. One's a sketch show called Big Train, and one is a sitcom called A Bunch of Hippies. Come and get involved.
Right.
And so he did. And off the back of that, that's what we have, right? That's the context, really. But I think the most important thing to establish here is that Hippies was the follow-up to Father Ted. And that's how it was sold.
Yes.
It was trailed quite heavily. Like, they pushed this. They marketed it. And it was like, from the creators of Father Ted, that show that everybody loves. Because Father Ted was a massive hit.
Was this also on Channel 4?
No, it was on BBC.
So Matthews and Linehan had got a BBC gig.
But they'd worked a lot with the BBC. Father Ted was the exception rather than the rule there. They'd worked mostly with the BBC. And also, by the way, another connection, Talkback Productions, which was a production company started by Mel Smith and Griff Rhys-Jones, basically produced most of the shows that we're going to be talking about throughout this. All these people are connected. Not actually Father Ted, but a lot of the other stuff. But yeah, Hippies itself, it went out in November and December of 1999. It went out on 9:30 on BBC Two on a Friday. It went out between Have I Got News for You and League of Gentlemen. So that's kind of where we're at. That Friday night lineup.
That's good billing, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Like I said, this was a big show. They were expecting it to do well. So the question arises: why does Hippies not really work? because obviously it got lukewarm reviews and they didn't make any more. But also watching it 20 years later, 25 years later, there's something that's not quite gelling here. So what is it?
I don't know. I think we've not talked about this until now, but I got the vibe that you'd not enjoyed it very much. And I watched it thinking, oh God, this isn't going to be very good. And I think I enjoyed it more than you did.
I mean, to be fair, yeah, it's a perfectly easy watch. It's funny. It's silly. But it's no Father Ted. It's no Father Ted. And, okay, perhaps it's unfair to make that comparison. But also, it's like, yeah, I can see why they didn't make any more of this. I can see why it's not really very well remembered.
Well, I don't want to steal your thunder for later, but I assumed the reason they didn't make any more of this was because everybody went on to bigger things. Well, no, Simon Pegg went on to bigger things.
Well, do you know what? Not exactly. A second series was commissioned. And back then, as more so than now, the BBC certainly would give you a couple of series to kind of figure this out. And Arthur Matthews had written some scripts even. It was kind of well underway. Okay. But the reviews came in and it was all very kind of lukewarm, and Arthur Matthews just kind of went, sod it. I've got other ideas. Let's just move on.
Right.
Do you want to get into the episode and we'll kind of address some things as we go along? Or...
Okay. Well, the episode that we're covering is, Series 1's only one series. Episode 5, Muddy Hippies.
And I honestly, it was just a shot in the dark which episode to look at. There's no one that particularly stands out as amazing or anything like that.
I'd agree with that, yeah. I'd agree with that. There's no stinkers and there's no particular highlights. It's it's pretty level show.
Although interesting to note that episode 4, which is Hippy Dippy Hippies, is the one that was filmed as a pilot.
Oh, okay.
Now, they completely refilmed it and rewrote it, but that's essentially the plot. And it makes perfect sense because it sets up... It opens with a newsreel
Which one is Hippy Dippy Hippies? Remind me of the plot of that episode.
That's the one with the police. Their magazine, their underground magazine gets stolen, and the police come and help
Pierce
them.
Quigley. A young Pierce Quigley.
One of many guest actors in this. So... that establishes all the characters. It opens with newsreel footage going, oh, here, it's swinging the 60s, and with this underground newspaper is being printed. And it totally establishes everything we need to do. So why is that not the first episode?
Yeah.
Obviously,
why is that episode 4?
Yeah, it's not. Who knows? Well, but they put a new episode up as episode 1. That doesn't help it. I don't think that helps the kind of run of the series, but there we go. That's what they did. These things, in hindsight, you can say things work.
Well, in the absence of episode 4, why don't we set Hippies up? So it's what we have are these 4 characters who live in a squat. Does Sally Phillips' character actually live with them, or does she live separately?
I mean, none of this is really particularly clear.
It doesn't matter because they're in a squat and it's all this communal living. And Simon Pegg's character Ray edits an underground magazine called Mouth.
Yes.
And Julian Rhind-Tutt just sort of minces around with a cigarette. Darren Boyd's stupid. And Sally Phillips is repressed. That's it.
Yes. So, but the idea is they're young people, they're counterculture, and they want to have their voices heard. So they're making a magazine called Mouth. And very idealistic. Certainly, Ray, who is played by Simon Pegg, is very idealistic and wants to change the world. The others seem less bothered, and they're just doing their thing. But perhaps that is our first issue. It's a bit directionless. It's a little bit like, what are they doing and why are they doing it? And so Ray has that direction, I think. But the rest of them don't.
The character of Ray, I mean, I'm sort of instinctively thinking about Father Ted. And I was like, well, he's the Ted character who's kind of always a bit frustrated in what he's trying to achieve. He wants to, he's idealistic and he wants to change the world. But, he's basically crap. And he sort of knows he is, but he's also got a bit of self-delusion. And ultimately, he's constantly frustrated. That's where the comedy comes from.
I think you've hit on a problem here that I found as well. And it may just be as simple as Simon Pegg's performance. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but the choices that they've made here. Because I think Ray needs to be more frustrated. He needs to be more exasperated. He needs to go full Basil Fawlty sometimes. And he is I'm trying to change the world here, and everyone around me is just crap, and they're not doing what I want them to. My parents aren't supporting me properly in the way I want, or my parents aren't angry at me enough because I'm trying to rebel and they're supporting me too much. Or why is this guy just lounging about on the settee smoking a cigarette when I'm trying to get things done? All this kind of thing, and it just never comes there. And I think it's a performance choice. It's not just in the writing.
That's a good observation.
Because if Hippies is anything, it's less than the sum of its parts. I think what Simon Pegg is doing as a character is fine, but perhaps it just doesn't work in the bigger picture of the whole show.
Yeah, I think the problem is that Ray's a loser. That's not the problem. The problem is that he's sort of all right with being a loser. He's not fighting it. He's not frustrated by it.
Yes.
He knows he's a loser and he just gets on with losing. And that's not as funny.
Perhaps, yeah. Okay, so that's our setup. Let's jump into our episode then, which is Muddy Hippies, episode 5.
Yeah, we start with a little sort of no dialogue scene with Ray in music shop.
Right, yeah, so we have a little scene in this record shop, and he goes into a little, one of those booths. They have soundproof booth, I guess, to listen to the record. Now, I'm too young to remember records, Gareth. Do you? Do you remember this particular... Did you ever go in HMV and listen to a record?
I did. The first music I bought was vinyl, but it went to CD quite soon. But I do remember you could listen to it in the shop. And this is something I was telling my son, like a hideous old man, about, we didn't have Spotify. If you'd heard a song on the radio and you liked the sound of it, you had to decide, do I take a gamble on the album, because, you wouldn't hear all the other album tracks, and the number of times you commit your $13.99 and it turns out there's only that one good song on the whole album.
Yeah.
So we had listening booths, as they have here, were a little bit before my time, but there were like listening stations, so there'd be like 4 or 5 set up in HMV, and you could, you'd put your CD in and you'd have a pair of sweaty communal headphones to put on. And you could stand and listen to the CD.
Yeah. Try before you buy.
Well, it's a good idea, but I was never really into it. I sort of tried it a couple of times, and then you start standing there for 15 seconds, starting to feel self-conscious. I'm like, oh, all right, I'll buy it. I don't know what the correct procedure is. Are you supposed to stand there and listen to the whole album for like 45 minutes? Is that what's meant to happen? I'm not sure. But anyway, so Ray has decided he likes the artist called Art Ledger, and. Actually, can we have a little diversion here about names?
Right.
So I'm going to give you the names of our 4 main characters here.
Yeah.
They are Ray Purbs, Alex Picton-Dinch, Hugo Yemp, and Jill Sprint.
Yeah. These are very kind of Father Ted type names. This is not unusual for
Now, I tell you what, these
Linehan.
are not Father Ted type names. These are Toast of London type names.
Well, so we'll come on to that later, but Arthur Matthews is
Arthur
one of the
Matthews.
writers of Toast of London.
This is early Toast of London.
But like Father Ted, you will see that there's often silly character names. There's a bit more of an Irish kind of vibe with them. But yeah, certainly the Matthews and Linehan world has kind of ridiculous character names. They're not going for reality. It's slightly heightened, but the names themselves are not a joke.
They're just right.
They're
just right. He's not called Hugo Bottom or Hugo Arse or anything like that. It's like a made up word that sounds sort of funny but isn't really a word. They're really great. I think you can get a bit eye rolly very quickly by doing silly names.
Yeah.
But I think even Toast of London, I think they nail it.
Well, I think this is kind of really central to Arthur Matthews' work, because people often use the word surreal with like this stuff in Father Ted. It's not quite that, but it's hyper real. Certainly, there's a lot of silliness and kind of unreality of the situations. Yes. Even if it's just slapstick, physical thing, cartoonish violence that will happen. But it's just kind of lifted out of reality. But it never quite finds
but
surreal.
Not too much.
It reminds me a little bit of French and Saunders, actually. French and Saunders' sketchwork was also always a bit surreal, but it never quite was just... Never like Jam, for example, like Chris Morris stuff, which is properly surreal.
Yes.
It never quite... Although Linehan and Matthews wrote for that. But like French and Saunders, and even Absolutely Fabulous, is just kind of slightly heightened characters and slightly heightened reality. And it sort of reminds me of that kind of vibe.
Well, I'll tell you what then, I interrupted there. Let's get back to the squat. So Ray has discovered Art Ledger. Yes. And the next scene, he turns up at the squat and he's basically dressed as Art Ledger. Do you want to describe the outfit?
60s.
Yeah, well, he's got a sort of floral hat, shirt, and a sheepskin
waistcoat,
sleeveless jacket, and pink hat with a ribbon on it. Yeah. It's very psychedelic.
Yeah. Now, Ray is quite a sad person. He's a bit of a pathetic character. So dressing up as your favourite pop artist when you're an adult is quite a sad thing to do. And I think it's sort of in keeping with him, because he's just desperate to be fashionable and trendy.
Yeah.
But it makes less sense that Alex and Jill are doing the same thing, because they are quite cool.
Yeah, that's the joke. So they both come in one at a time, and indeed Hugo later as well. They're all dressed in exactly the same way.
But they call this out later on, because later on in the episode, Ray is still dressed like Art Ledger, and the other two are not. And they basically say, but yeah, as soon as people like you dressed like him, it's not cool anymore.
Bear in mind here that Jill is Ray's girlfriend. She says, once people like you began wearing it, it all became a bit meaningless.
But that's it. And that's how quickly things go out of fashion.
Yeah, yeah. And then Jill comes in and she's carrying this like big Ming vase.
Now,
and I wrote down, why is she carrying that? And before I got to the end of the sentence, there's a really crap but really well directed joke where Ray says, "Oh, I think he might be better than Dylan," and she drops the vase and breaks it because it's such a shocking thing to say.
Look, I know enough about Arthur Matthews that when someone walks in carrying a giant vase, it's going to get dropped, okay?
Of course, but I was thinking, there's no reason for it to have that. How are you justifying that? And of course, you're justifying it for the joke. Yeah. It's a nice bit of, is it Brechtian, Alan? Is it Brechtian? Is that what it is? Don't laugh at me with your film graduate, your film degree.
No, that's quite Brechtian. Not really, no. But
it's funny.
Again, this is classic Matthews and Linehan writing. I mean, Father Ted is littered with this stuff. How could you get a perfectly square piece of dirt on a window? You know, it's this kind of like
yeah.
It's. I mean, I think they literally did this, but they start with where they want to end up, and then work backwards. Like, how can we make that happen?
Yeah,
and it doesn't have to make a lot of sense. Okay, Father Jack's got a pet brick. That's why there's a brick later on. And it works. I actually think they get away with it a lot.
So I think this might be a nice time to talk a bit more about Jill, because we set up a little bit here that she's a feminist. That's her character. But she's obviously not a particularly good feminist, and she's still trying to figure it all out.
Yeah.
In times of crisis, women must stick together to, in effect, become sticky women stuck together with gluey feminism.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's a nice sort of, but what is Jill? That's a good question, because again, I think it's one of those ill-defined things. The characters are a little bit loose and they haven't really figured it out, which is perhaps why the show isn't gelling in the way it should be. But Jill is, this kind of 1960s feminist. Like, there's a whole bit where she goes, "Oh, I am a strong woman, I'm a feminist." I'm like, "Oh my God, that's a mouse." And like, she screams and like, that's a very immediate...
I think she's a bit one-dimensional. She's there mostly as a foil for Ray, for his sexual frustration, basically.
Yeah, but even that, like, she refuses to have sex with him. We'll talk about this a little bit later in this episode. But this is a running thing that she is, in theory, his girlfriend, but she won't have sex with him. But why? Like, it's never quite clear why. But it's not even like, "Oh, I'm making a feminist stance. I don't want to have sex with you because I'm a feminist," or something like that. It's not, "Oh, I don't really fancy you." I don't know what it is. Like, what's going on here? And I think it's all
I'm not sure.
a bit loose.
But I think that, like, that sexual frustration of Ray is a comedy staple, isn't it? You know, that's a funny setup for a character. But that is very Ray-centric. You know, in that sense, all Sally Phillips' character is the reaction to that.
Yeah, and he's often trying to get off with other people and all that sort of thing. Like, and he doesn't,
free love, man.
And he doesn't manage it with anyone else. And in fact, there's an episode where it's on a plate for him. An older woman, Eleanor Bron, guest role.
Oh yeah,
and
he's terrified,
and it's Alex's mother. But yeah, he's just absolutely terrified because she's a strong woman.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the oldest tropes in the book, isn't it? You know, sex starved, and then when you get the opportunity, you're terrified.
But yeah, so Jill's character, I think, is kind of a bit loosely written, but I mean, let's face it. Looking back over the work of Arthur Matthews, there were a lot of really well-written female characters. You know, Father Ted is all
Fair
men,
point.
apart from Mrs. Doyle. Paris is all men.
Actually, you know, because you've just made me think about it. I know you don't want to go back to it, but having just watched Paris a couple of days ago, there's no female characters in that either. There's one female character who every week turns up in one scene and gets shouted at, and that's it.
Yeah. There's a lot of sexual frustration in that as well. Alexis Hale's character hasn't had sex for years.
That's true.
Let's have a quick mention of Sally Phillips. Let's go into her in a bit more detail. We've talked about her before because we did Miranda.
We did her in Miranda, didn't we?
But yeah, and we established she is actually a bit proper like posh. She went to boarding school and all that, which is like quite like her character in Miranda. She was sort of pulling from personal experience of posh girls at boarding school. She was an international kid. Her father was a high-flying executive, so she kind of travelled the world and then ended up at boarding school and Oxbridge University, wherever that is. And that's where she met Leon Herring, Stuart Lee and Richard Herring, in like the Oxford comedy circles.
Yeah.
She did end up in a relatively serious relationship with Richard Herring. I think they were together for a few years when you're in your early 20s. That's pretty meaningful, isn't it?
It is.
I think they may have had their down times, but ultimately are still friends now.
She was recently on his podcast, actually. If you're interested in that sort of thing,
yeah,
you have a listen to that. It's good. It's not. I don't think it's the first time they've spoken in 20 years, but they put it all out there. It was good.
Yeah, and like some of her early credits were with them. Fist of Fun. She was on that a couple of times, and then she was a regular on Six Pairs of Pants. That was kind of her first kind of you are hired for this part kind of role. Smack the Pony was probably rose her fame in terms of, she was a top-end sketch comedian. But then, Sally Phillips, we talked about before, she's sitcom royalty, we've established that. But in terms of, regular, she's never had that kind of, this is the Sally Phillips show, the kind of, we've built a show around.
I understand what you're saying.
Although she has had that, they just weren't particularly successful. Tourist Trap, that was built around her, and Parents was kind of really, she was the central character in that. But I mean, Sally Phillips has turned up in loads of shows, and not just as a sort of one episode here, one episode there. She will turn up for a guest, she's in Trolleyed for half a series, or
yeah, she's good in that. I just watched Trolleyed recently, and that's she's sort of a very big character. She's in Veep, quite a sort of occasional guest appearances in which she steals the show, and that is of course in the, I'm going to say it, Armando universe. No, never mind. And she's been in Taskmaster recently as well, so I think she's still kind of one of the faces. You see it. It's not like she's been put out to pasture.
But no, definitely not. And I think she's just never quite found that kind of lead role that is the sitcom we've built around her. But she doesn't have that kind of supporting actor energy either. I think we said this in Miranda. When she turned up in Miranda, my first thought was aren't you a bit big for this? Playing a guest part in this, and then becoming a regular side character.
Yeah, the part becomes much bigger, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's you're too good for this, aren't you? And maybe that's just my perception of Sally Phillips. I think she should be in a lead of a sitcom. Obviously, she's in the Bridget Jones film. She plays one of the friends in the Bridget Jones films. But she auditioned to play Bridget Jones, which would make a lot of sense. She's the right kind of age and look and all that sort of thing. So they just obviously liked her.
God, that could have gone a different way. Then her career would have been different.
Well, exactly. That's it, isn't it? But I suppose sometimes you are just the bridesmaid. But she's had regular work out of that. They've done 4 of those now. They've dragged that out for 20 years.
It keeps coming back, doesn't it? It keeps coming back for that one scene that she's in where they're all getting drunk on Prosecco.
All right, let's jump back into our episode and see what happens next.
So we got some setup in this first. So we got the Art Ledger outfit thing.
Yeah.
Jill being a bit of a feminist. And then we also learn in this scene that Ray's bought a Ginkle car for £30.
We should go to that pop concert in Oxford, We can get an interview with Art Ledger. We can go in my new car. It'll be great. I haven't seen it yet, but it's called a Ginkle.
You've bought a car?
Yeah. It's being delivered on Sunday. It's East German, right? There's only 2 in the country. It's brilliant. It's a bargain as well, £30.
£30? Well, I hope you didn't take that money out of the printing fund. It's an awful lot of money for us and a worryingly small amount for a motor car.
Do you know what? It's just, the use of the word motor car instead of car is just perfect there. It just fits his character, doesn't it?
That's comic time. Do you think they sort of sat thinking about that? Arthur Matthews sat
definitely
playing that sentence out and the timing of it? Because you're right. It definitely is funnier than just car.
So Ray, he says he's bought a car. It's called a Ginkle. It's East German. Now, this is 1969, this is set, okay. So tell me a bit about East Germany, Gareth. I know this is a sort of pet subject.
Right, so the Ginkle is made up, but it's based on do you know what the East German car is?
No.
A Trabant. Have you heard of that?
Ooh. No, I don't
so
think I have.
The Trabant is the genuine East German car. It was manufactured by the German Democratic Republic. It was the sort of state-owned car. And they were crap. They were comically bad.
Yes.
And they were made all throughout the Cold War, from the Berlin Wall, basically the whole time the Berlin Wall was there. I visited Berlin on a school trip in 1991. So it was just after the wall had come down. And there was no wall, you could come and go. But there was a barrier, that you could see a real difference between West and East as you walked across.
You still can.
Yeah, but one of the really very initially noticeable things was on the east of the border, I'm going to say 2/3 of the cars were Trabants. No exaggeration. If I'd have gone there 10 years earlier, it'd have been 100%. That was the only car that anyone had in East Germany. I think they're oddly beautiful, actually. I actually bought a model. I had a little model one on my shelf for many years. I don't know where that went. But yeah, I don't think they were particularly good cars. And there was like a 15-year waiting list to get one as well.
Wow. But this sets up something I'd like to talk about here, where Ray, obviously he is espousing the virtues of the East German car because they're a socialist superstate, so that obviously everything they do is amazing because he's a hippie.
It's East German, Alex. The model socialist state. That means it'll be really reliable. So reliable, in fact, I'm not even going to insure it, Because it could never, ever, ever, ever break down or be involved in any kind of accident whatsoever.
Yeah, but this is interesting, isn't it? Because hippies weren't communists. That was not the same thing. Mm-hmm. Counterculture, yes. So I think there's a bit here of, not that Ray is a communist, but that he wants to, smash the system, man.
Yeah.
in whatever way.
Yeah.
So they're the other side. Therefore, they're not the man.
Yes. But what we have here is a little gag where Ray says, no, this is the East German car. It's going to be great. It's going to be so good that I'm not even going to bother insure it. And it will never, ever, 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 ever break down.
Yeah.
What do you think will happen later, Gareth?
Well, okay, obviously that's a setup. But it's what we were saying earlier. It's just flagged beautifully. It's like the vase. We know that what he's doing. We understand the physics of comedy, but it's still quite funny. You get 2 laughs out of it.
Well, here's the thing, Gareth. Here's my argument. This gag, say something will happen and then the opposite happens, basically. Or say something will definitely not happen and then it does, Yeah. This is a gag that they use a lot. And just to test that, I went through this episode and wrote down every example of it.
All right.
And they use that gag, that setup and punchline, 9 times in this episode.
Okay.
So, like, for example, they're hitchhiking. This is useless. We'll never get a lift. Alex puts out his thumb in the car, immediately parks up. Things like that. But 9 times in this episode. I put to you is too much to rely on that.
Well, I didn't notice it was that frequent.
And obviously it's deliberate. They're leaning into it. It is deliberately making a kind of silly kind of joke.
Let me ask a question. Those 9 times, are they all Ray?
No, but mostly Ray.
Yeah, because I think, it is a trope, it is a writing tool, but I think it's also part of his character. It's, he's just wrong. He's just an idiot.
Yeah, and like I say, on an individual level, it works, and it's fitting with the tone of the comedy, but it's a little bit too much, and it's not just this episode, it's the whole show. And I think that's the sort of thing where you become overly reliant on set gags like that. That's the difference between a great show and a perfectly fine show, So these are little things I want to point out as we're going along.
No.
So, and then just before we move on, there's a bit in this scene where Ray is trying to do a pained metaphor about sweeping away.
Well, I enjoy a stretched metaphor.
You've got to sweep scepticism away as a new broom, Imagine, say that broken vase piece is there. Say that's scepticism, right? And that broom there is... Well, I mean, it's a broom, but it's not just a real broom. It's a metaphorical broom.
So he says, I could sweep away skepticism. That's what he says. I'll sweep away skepticism, like sweeping away these broken vase pieces. And then he labours the point.
And it's a nice little bit. And then Alex, he's kind of just saying, I get it. You stop doing
I understand
this,
the metaphor.
Please stop. But here's the reason I wanted to point this little bit out is because the broom that he's sweeping with, the head falls off the broom. And I genuinely don't know if this is a little bit of improv from Simon Pegg, because it doesn't feel... There's a nice little bit where he then just kind of plays around with the broom and he's like, okay, we're hitting the skepticism. But that doesn't feel scripted. It doesn't feel like a natural kind of growth of the joke. It just feels like the broom head's fallen off and he's just having a bit of fun with it. Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% of that. And I don't know if there's like a shooting script out there so you'd be able to see. But I think it's a nice bit of work from Simon Pegg there.
So actually, you know what? Before we move on, I realise for the rest of this episode we're going to be out at a pop festival. So this is the last scene we have in the squat. So before we move off out of the squat, let's talk about the set. Yes. What did you make of the squat? Some really odd stuff in there.
Yeah, we've picked a sort of unusual episode here because there's quite a bit of location filming and also like all this stuff kind of at the festival in a tent, which is relatively unusual. This is our main set. It is the squat. There's a bedroom, there's a kitchen, but the living room is our main thing. Yeah. And yeah, it's supposed to be Notting Hill Gate kind of area, and it's like there's literally holes in the wall, like walls have been ripped out. There's a huge
you can see that the wall's been knocked through to the kitchen.
Yeah, there's a metal pole like holding up the floor and stuff like that. It's a basement flat.
Well, the first thing I basically paused and I had a little look around. And the first thing I noticed was it looks really grubby. Like, you know, there's just everything sort of coated in dirt, which I think is probably a nice realistic of, well, not 1967 particularly, but just any shared house of 20-odd-year-olds.
Yeah.
But there's like a rancid settee with threadbare cushions. There's a chair, interestingly. It's got an American flag as a sort of throw. And I thought that was odd. You know, we just talked about this counterculture thing. Like, why would they have an American flag as a prop? I don't quite make that out. In the kitchen there's a notice board. It's got lots of sort of pamphlets and slogans on it. There's a very grubby looking ironing board. There's the ubiquitous Che Guevara poster, of course.
Of course.
On the floor there's a leopard print rug. Don't know. And there's they're using what looks like an old fashioned trunk as a coffee table. You know, it looks like the sort of thing that Harry Potter would go to Hogwarts with.
Yeah.
And it's got, so here's a question for you. It's got in the initials RWG on it. Any idea what that is?
That doesn't relate to any of our characters. It probably is just
because I thought it was Alex, like Alex's initials, but of course it's not.
But I probably just a prop. Like someone went down and found it in a.
Are you saying I'm overthinking
shop? Yeah.
Well, I wondered if it was the Royal Welsh Guards, but I don't think it is because, well, frankly, there's not really any such thing as the Royal Welsh Guards. There's the Welsh Guards and the Royal Welsh Regiment. They're two different things. But there's also, so going back to our set, there's also in the background what looks like an old-fashioned British Army redcoat on a mannequin in the background. What the hell is that? Why is that in there? I think subconsciously I'd noticed that before I RWG'd into Royal Welsh Guards.
But yeah, I mean, it's when set decorators are given free rein to do what they want to create the 1969 squad.
But, I mean, it's a nice prop, but why would these countercultural people have a British Army uniform in there? There's also a World War II gas mask on a mannequin or on a bust. And there's a massive filing cabinet as well, which I guess that relates to the magazine. It
is their office as well. They're creating a magazine. Yeah.
So I liked it. It's squalid.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it does look pretty horrible, but also livable. It does feel like a squat, you know.
I don't know. Maybe when I was 24, livable. I don't think I could live there now.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? When I was 24, I did live there. I lived in it. It wasn't a squat. We paid rent, but it was a shared house, and we had a settee that we'd gone and found at the dump.
Yeah, exactly.
So God knows what was living in that. So it was very relatable actually. Back to the episode then, Alan. So we leave the squat and we go outside. And we are looking at the car, the Ginkle.
The Ginkle, it's this very silly prop, but it works.
It's a very funny prop. Yeah, exactly. It's the vase again. It's such a bad prop, but it's a very funnily bad prop.
Yeah, and it's deliberate, as opposed to saying, "Are you being served?" Where that's just the props are crap. Yes.
Well, do you know what? There are photographs of me as a kid. I'm probably no more than 3 or 4 years old. Basically playing in a cardboard box. I don't know if my mum and dad had bought a new telly or something. And we'd fashioned this cardboard box into a car, you know, drawn wheels on the side of it and cut the window out. And that is what they've done. The only difference is they've painted it grey. They've taken a mobility scooter and they've put grey cardboard on it.
Yeah, sort of plastic windows. And then just to heighten it, even though it is tiny, he can't reach the pedals. Which is like, there's a real kind of...
It's crazy.
That's a real kind of manipulation of space in there.
Yeah. We see them all in the car. Ray's trying to get it started. There's smoke everywhere. Brilliantly, Alex is still smoking. Alex has always got a cigarette going. that never stops. Yeah, they're crushed in there. He can't reach the pedals. There's smoke everywhere. And then we cut to a shot of it moving along, and you can see Julian Ryan Tutt in there, and there's just some obviously fake heads assembled around him on this mobility scooter. It's so funny. It's so crap. It's genuinely very funny. And then we have a hard cut to them hitchhiking, and then there's a gradual pan across, and we see obviously the car's broken down, but we see the prop is now snapped in half, literally broken down the middle.
Yeah, as part of this kind of hyper-real comedy that we deal with. It's literally broken in half. So there you go.
I'm laughing out loud, Alan. I'm still laughing about it. So you can stick it. I think this is really funny.
Well, that's all we've got time for this week, I'm afraid, but do come back next time for the rest of our discussion on hippies. We've still got lots of actors to talk about, including Simon Pegg, of course. I read his autobiography, so I've got lots to talk about there. Come back for that next week. In the meantime, if you would like to get in touch with us, we are on social media at BritcomPod. You can find us on Facebook by searching for British Sitcom History Podcast. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you very much. See you next time.